What's up, you guys? In today's video, I'm going to touch on some things I missed out on my last video about my apartment living in New York. To clarify things, I do live in Brooklyn, right? I live 17 minutes from downtown Manhattan, so I'm very central. My place is pretty cheap by New York standards. It's $2,000. A studio, it has a bunch of amenities, a lot of cool perks and stuff like that. But in this video, I want to help you guys find a great apartment, whether you want to move to New York or if you live here already. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to find a cheap apartment. And then also we're going to talk about rent stabilization. This place is rent stabilized. And I'm going to talk about how that's the biggest life hack in New York. What to look for when you're looking for apartments in New York City, because it's pretty tricky. Landlords and estate agents like to hide things and they like to advertise things differently. But I'm going to give you guys some main things that you should look for if you want to find a solid place so you don't have any regrets. So if you like all that stuff, stick around and we're going to get straight into it. So if you guys watched my last video, you'll see that I changed things around a little bit. I got rid of the table, just having more space to do different things, have a little gym set up. I'm going to show you that later. Yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, if I should change anything around, if you guys like how it is. I'm trying to keep it low key, but also kind of spacious. One thing I love is like finding furniture that you can do different things with. So this is a standing desk, but it also moves down. So when you have a small space, it's really important to find, different uses for stuff. This couch is a game changer for real, like so good for entertaining people, relaxing, chilling, having friends over. All right, for this part of the video, I figure I get a little bit more cozy because we're going into some technical stuff, talking about rent stabilization. Okay, so this place is rent stabilized. I'm so happy about that. What does that mean? All that means is that rent stabilized apartments, the rent increases every year, but it's by a percentage that's set by New York City. So a landlord can increase your rent by like $500 or $1,000 after your year lease finishes or your 2-year lease finishes. They can only increase it by the percentage that the city thinks is, like a good amount, right? So an example is during the pandemic, the increases for a couple of years was 0%. So to help people out, rent wasn't increasing by anything for a couple of years, right? So that was great for tenants because we could pay the same rent and, it kept rents down, right? So if you don't have a rent stabilized apartments, which I would say in New York City, maybe like a good percentage of apartments here are rent stabilized, but the mass majority of it are private and aren't rent stabilized. So if you don't have a rent stabilized apartment, that means after your lease finishes, your landlord can jack up that rent, bro. He could jack it up $500, $1,000. That's not too common, but just depending on the market conditions, right? We saw like after the pandemic, everybody moved back to New York City. And then after, the rents went way high for people who weren't rent stabilized, right? So if you can, when looking for an apartment, look for a rent stabilized apartment. So there's a website called Street Easy, and you can actually filter by rent stabilized apartments. This place had a broker's fee, which I talked about in my last video. If you're interested in learning about what a broker's fee is, I explain it there, but I had to pay a month broker's fee, which was $2,000 up front just to get the apartment, but it was rent stabilized, right? So that's one of those things you got to think about when looking for an apartment. You have to decide, if I'm going to stay here for a while, what's that broker's fee in the long term if I get a rent stabilized apartment? Because the worst situation is that you end up getting a place, you love it, your lease comes to an end, you got to renew it, and then they jack up the price and you have to move, right? If you love a place, you kind of want to stay there, right? If you're looking just for temporary housing, or you think you'll probably move every year, or you're only in New York temporarily, then it isn't a huge concern, but it's always better to have that added flexibility of getting a place that, the rent won't increase by too much. So if you really like it, you can end up staying. And that's a huge life hack right there, guys. So make sure if you're looking for a place, look for a rent stabilized apartment. That way you can keep your costs down and enjoy New York City on the low, without paying too much money, because this place is already expensive. You feel me? All right. That's rent stabilization. Okay, so I actually recently got this. I've been trying to integrate more cardio into my workout routine, and it's been crazy. I've been seeing so many results, but also I feel more energetic and stuff like that. So of course I used to use the treadmill at the gym, but I actually got a walking pad, an incline treadmill kinda. They're really lightweight, they work really well. Got it from Amazon, and I just run for 1 hour every single morning before I go to work. It's cool right in the middle with this extra space. I can work out there, but then, you know, after that, I can put it down, hide it underneath my couch, put it underneath my bed, wherever, and it's back to normal. And I can just whip it out whenever I need it. So my biggest tip to find cheap apartments in New York City is to check the listing websites every single day. So on StreetEasy.com, they post, this is not an ad by the way, but they literally post new listings every single day at 8 a.m. And sometimes those listings are gone depending on how good the deal is, right? So you got to always be checking. I think you can set up notifications and stuff like that. But another hack too is basically don't only look in Manhattan, because a lot of people not from New York City or who haven't ventured out into the boroughs, they just think that everything cool and everything important is in Manhattan. And that's not really the case anymore, right? There's a lot of cool stuff going on in boroughs outside of Manhattan. For example, in Queens, in Brooklyn, what are the other boroughs? In the Bronx too, a little bit. Not so much Staten Island and stuff, but pretty much Queens and Brooklyn. You can get a bigger apartment, way better deals like how I did in Brooklyn, and you can still be really close to the city. Sometimes if you live in Brooklyn or Queens or the Bronx, it's faster to get to this, like fun places in the city than it would be if you lived in the city actually, right? So look around there. Also, some other areas in the city is Washington Heights, Harlem, Inwood. Areas like those have cheaper deals usually, right? So don't only look at areas that you think are your favorite parts of New York. Look at the connections, because I'll tell you, one of the most important things is how fast you can get around, right? Some people who live kind of deep in Queens, it's easy for them to get to Midtown. It can take like 20 minutes. Whereas when I used to live in East Village, it would take me like 40 minutes to get to Midtown because I live 17 minutes from a train station, right? So its location is important, but there's a lot of other factors that go into things. So my biggest hacks would be to just like check the websites every single day. Make sure you're checking areas on the outskirts, in the boroughs. Areas of New York have a lot going on besides what's in the tourist areas or what's in the mainstream areas, right? So yeah, look into that as well. All right, for this one right here, we're gonna go over what you should look for in a New York City apartment. There's a few things that are gonna be deal breakers for some of you, and for other people, you're not gonna care that much about, you know, if they have it or not. So I'm gonna just go through it real quick. Is it a walk-up? Does it have an elevator, right? So my place has an elevator. Some places don't have elevators, especially the older buildings. That's just not common. So it's not bad if you're on the second floor, third floor, first floor, but if you are really high up, let's say there's like 8 floors, 6 floors, you're on the top, every day that adds up, right? Because I lived in a place in East Village, and I was on the 6th floor, and if you forgot your keys and you're downstairs walking up, it's a good way to get exercise and stuff, but it can be inconvenient if you have groceries or if, you know, you got to carry stuff up every single day. Laundry is another thing. My place in the East Village, by the way, this is very common of Manhattan apartments. They have like nothing special about them usually, but they cost a lot of money. That Manhattan place that I lived at before was $2,800, and it had nothing like I have here. So my quality of life is way better living in Brooklyn, a little bit further out, but like, you know, living in a building that offers more, a little bit more space. My last place was a 1-bedroom, and it's smaller than the studio that I have here, which is a studio, right? So something else is laundry. A lot of apartments in the city don't have laundry because they're older buildings, they can't accommodate it. So people take their laundry, they go to wash and folds where they drop off their laundry, or they go to laundromats and get their laundry done. But this is a really big inconvenience because, especially in the wintertime, like taking all your clothes out of the house, carrying it, doing laundry, that's a lot, right? So another thing that might be a deal breaker to people is if there's laundry in the building, either in the unit, which is kind of rare, but at least in the building, in the basement or something like that. How far you are from the train, right? So that's something that doesn't seem like a big deal at first because you're like, oh, it's just 15, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. There's a few buses and stuff. But let me tell you, if you're commuting every single day, walking that 20 minutes really adds up, and it can be really frustrating, right? And it can like really inconvenience your day because especially in the wintertime, it gets really cold. It can be inconvenient, right? Some people care about that, some people don't. I would say the happiest people live really close to a train station, but of course that's a luxury and not everyone can get that. So just trying to think about that as well. And apartments are priced higher when they are closer to train stations for that very reason. Another thing to consider is if you're in the basement or if you're on the first floor, that's susceptible to flooding in New York City. So when there's floods and stuff like that, and when it's raining a lot, like those apartments have been known to have water go inside of it and are a whole mess. Also, if you're really concerned about pests like rats, mice, you know, roaches, all that stuff. Like, a place might say that they don't have these things, and you know, I really like that they're saying that, but when you're on the first floor, you have a higher chance of getting those things, only because mice and pests and all that stuff like to stay closer to the ground instead of going all the way up. So your chances increase of just having like critters coming in and stuff like that. I've never lived in a place with mice in New York. I've been so lucky to avoid that, but it's definitely a reality of living in New York, only because a lot of the buildings are really old. There's going to be holes and cracks. There's a ton of restaurants everywhere. It's kind of a part of the life here. But if you want to avoid that, which I do, because I really hate rodents and all that stuff. That's like the #1 deal breaker. There's a few websites you can use that review the building. One of them is called Open Igloo, where like past residents can leave reviews on the building and talk about how bad the landlord is, or if there's rats. And there's also another website provided by the New York City government, I guess, that talks about the index of how many rats that are in that building or in that area. So these are all good indications about if you should live in a place. Look at the reviews first, and sometimes even some buildings have Google Maps locations and people leave reviews. And the last two is air conditioning and dishwasher, right? So a lot of apartments in New York City don't have air conditioning. It's really cheap. You can buy one for like $100 used. You just put it in your window. You can pay someone to install it. Sometimes your landlord installs it for you if you ask them, or pay them like $30 or something, 40, 50. I don't know what the going rate is anymore. But yeah, my place, I'm grateful. It's a newer building, so there is central AC. So there's AC coming from all different parts of this little studio, kitchen, main area, and it's controlled with this thermostat thing right there. And the last thing is dishwashers. Most places don't have dishwashers. It's like a luxury. If your place has a dishwasher, then that's a really nice bonus. There are options if you can't get that. For example, I bought this tabletop dishwasher, which works really great for me. It fulfills all my needs. I'm so happy I have it, but of course it takes up 80% of my counter space. So I don't have any counter space, but I hate doing dishes, so it works out for me, right? So a dishwasher, not really a deal breaker for most people, but it's something to consider. All right, well, that's it. Make sure if you guys like the video to subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, all that stuff. I really love hearing about everything you guys think about the video, answering your questions, helping you guys out. I know moving to New York City is extremely overwhelming, especially getting into the apartments. There's so many other aspects, commuting, finding a job, all of that stuff. So I'm just trying to, you know, share a little bit about what I know. So hopefully, you know, make your life a little bit better, right? Cool. All right. Yeah. So leave some comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.